The relationship between men and mental health has often been called a silent crisis. On this podcast, we're breaking the silence. Welcome to Mental Health. It's time to talk. Here's your host, Allan Kehler.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in to Mental Health. It's time to talk. Today, we have a mental health advocate. We have a very proud husband, a proud father, Tyson Williams. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Al. Thanks for having me.
Tyson, first of all, for all those who are tuning in live streaming, for the podcast, this won't be an issue, but I'm noticing that you are wearing a very interesting shirt. And by the way, to everybody tuning in, that was not planned, correct?
It wasn't. We'll be twinsies today.
Yeah, we can be samesies. Well, you look good. Now, I actually first heard your story, Tyson, 3-ish years ago. I was doing an event with Michael Landsberg. I think we were in Sudbury, Ontario, and he actually prefaced his talk by saying this. He said, "What I'm about to share, if it does not provoke an emotional response in you, I will buy you supper." So I was intrigued. And after hearing the story, I was inspired. I've always been inspired, and I'm very grateful that you took the time to join us. And I kind of want to start, Tyson, with October 2009, because in your own words, that was a day that you picked to die.
Yeah. I mean, that story you just told about Michael, I'd like to add, he's apparently challenged his audiences with buying them lunch or dinner after he tells the story, and for years. And according to him, he's never had to buy anyone a meal. And that's even including me, and I think he owes me at least that. But so October 2009, I'd been battling depression at that point for probably about 20 years, although I didn't know it. It started probably when I was 14, 15, and just kind of grew from there. And it came to a point. I mean, you wear that mask for that many years, for so long. It gets exhausting. It gets painful, both mentally and physically. I had worked up until that point. I worked at a psychiatric facility that I still work at, but at that point I'd been working there 10 years. And even then, at no point did I ever look at a patient or listen to a patient and think, man, I can relate to where this person's coming from. So after 20 years of battling, 20 years of, some suicidal ideation, and yet I was never worried about committing suicide because I was scared to do it, to be honest with you. And that's what kept me going for as many years as it did. But then, like I said before, you get that exhaustion, that just, that feeling you just don't have it anymore. You can't do it anymore. And it slowly becomes a reality. And October 2009, that's, I picked a day where that was going to be the day. There was no significance to that particular day or anything. And I remember waking up that morning, and I mean, there was some fear there for sure. But there was also a sense of relief, that this pain I'd been living with, it's going to be over soon. And I just didn't know when that day. So I basically, walked around the apartment and stuff and just waited for this switch to go off that just says, Kate Tyson, now's the time, go do it. I had gotten things ready. I'd went through a couple of dry runs. And that switch, thankfully now, it never went off. And I ended up turning the TV on. And, I like to say that for those who tell me I watch too much TV, well, TV saved my life. So I owe it to TV to watch it. and Off the Record came on. And at that point in time, when Off the Record first started, it had been on the air for about, 15, 16 years at that point. And when it first started, I watched it religiously. Over the years, it just became one of those shows that you turn on just because there's nothing else on. And at that point, that's what it was for me. And watched the show, and he had a guest on that particular show, that particular day, Stefan Richer, NHL player. He won 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, essentially a guy who lived my dream, to play in the NHL, to win Stanley Cups, except for playing for Montreal. That's never anybody's dream. But they spent maybe 2 minutes talking about Stefan's battle with depression. And at the end of it, I mean, Michael never really went into his story. And at the end of it, Michael just said, me too, I've been there, kind of thing. And I was just kind of blown away, because as Stefan's talking and I'm watching this, at this point, I'm like bawling. And it's like, finally, I've got a name to this, because everything he's describing happened to me. I can relate to. And it was the first time I'd ever seen not just 2 human beings talking about mental health, mental illness, but 2 guys. And they were talking about it. They weren't embarrassed about it. They weren't kind of whispering or anything. And just not ashamed. And that really hit me. And I mean, I can't describe, how it came to be that it just happened to be on that particular day where I saw it. And at the end of the episode, Michael's email pops up. And at that point, I'm still thinking this is going to be my last day. But I see his email pop up, and I decide to send him a message. I don't necessarily go into detail with him about the state I'm in that particular day, but just my message was basically just how cool I thought it was that him and another guy were talking about their mental health, their experiences, and that somebody was probably going to be saved from that show. And little did any of us know at that time it was going to be me.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, knowing where you were and knowing where you are today. And looking back, Tyson, before we get into what transpired after you sent that email, why did you feel the need to reach out? Because, I mean, like you said, you still had full intentions of carrying through with the suicide, but yet, what was it? Was there a part of you that really had a deeper desire to live?
There was that, and except I didn't really see it quite at that point. What happened was Michael replied to me, and it was what he said in his message. And it was so simple. Like, I think of it now and I think, man, that's all it took for me to just keep trying. But basically his message to me was he had asked me if I'd ever gotten help. And I hadn't told another living person what I'd been going through, what was going on, or anything like that. And he just said, why not? I mean, at least that way, if you do, if you don't think you're going to make it or whatever, at least that way you can go out saying, hey, at least I tried.
Well,
And
and Tyson, how did it even feel for you? Because you, as you alluded to, you never did share any of these deep, dark secrets with another individual. And yet there you are through email, sharing, reaching out. How did it even feel when you initially hit send?
I didn't think too much of it because, to be honest, I never thought I'd get a reply.
Hmm.
Part of it was also just simply kind of as a cover for me. So, at some point when I'm found, if people decide to look at my computer and stuff, and they'll see that I sent this email, and then they'll think, well, hey, at least he tried. It was that asshole Landsberg that never replied to him. Right? Only thing is that asshole replied.
Well, so then what exactly did you do when Landsberg had planted that seed to maybe reach out for help? What were the next steps for you?
The next steps were that I spent the rest of that day just kind of laying in bed, bawling, and basically cried myself to sleep that day. Um, I just remember waking up the next day and thinking, wow, I made it. I made it through that day. And there was like this feeling of a massive weight being lifted because I'd finally told somebody, even though it was this person that, I mean, at that time I figured I'm never going to talk to again, I'm never going to meet, but still just getting it out to another person was a huge relief. And I coasted on that relief. I didn't really do anything differently to help the state of mind I was in. I was just, I felt a tiny bit better, that I felt that sense of relief, that weight being lifted, and I coasted on it for, maybe a few weeks.
And Tyson, you and I are fortunate to speak with a lot of men who have struggled, who were able to find their voice, who were able to reach out for help, and they say the exact same thing. Yes, they use those words like freeing, liberated, no longer had to carry that secret. And that is a great first step. And many of them coast as you did. But then you ran into some personal challenges again, right? Where you had to fight what was going on in your head. And things got dark once more, yes?
Yes. So a few weeks later, after just coasting on that sense of relief, I had yet another meltdown. And I don't remember what event or if any particular event triggered it. I just know that it was about 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to either make a phone call or I was going to die. And it came down to that. And I remember, I had a phone book, and for those who may be watching who might not know what a phone book is, Google it. But the phone books always had these emergency numbers on the front cover. And I was looking for a suicide hotline. There wasn't one. But what there was here in North Battleford was a 24-hour sexual assault hotline. So I figured, okay, well, the sexual assault people must know some suicide people. And I called. And I mean, I'm just a slobbering mess at this point. And this lady answers the phone. And I ask her, if they have a number that I could call for like a suicide hotline. And again, there's this pause, and she just, the 3 words came out, "Are you okay?" And the whole blubbering mess started all over again. And I remember being able to hear her, whether it be on a cell phone or what, but making another call on another phone. And within minutes, there was 4 cops at my door. And again, like everything about my story is the people that came into my life, like, we hear so many kind of horror stories when police are involved and stuff like that. And I was extremely fortunate because these police, they came in, they sat down with me, they talked with me, asked me what was going on, and talked me into going to the hospital here in North Battleford, where I spent maybe about a week and a half on the mental health ward.
And when you were on that mental health ward, you talk about how that experience was able to help redefine what it meant to be a man, because you encountered someone while having a cigarette outside.
Yes, I encountered the biggest, manliest man I have ever seen to this day. I was a mountain, and I remember I'm standing beside him outside, and we're both having a smoke, and he just kind of nudges me and, "What you in for?" And at this point, I'm just trying not to wet my pants because I'm thinking this guy's going to kick my ass. And I just mumbled something like, "Oh, well, they tell me I've got depression." And he put his hand on my shoulder. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting strangled or something. And he just said, "Yeah, man, me too." And again, that just, I'm looking at this guy like I've described him before as probably 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. Just massive beard, just everything about, his hand was bigger than my head, and my head's pretty big. And, for him, and then he went into his story and his experience with it a bit. And, again, it hit me. Wow. If this guy can go through it, man, it's this depression thing. It can hit anybody.
Those are hands down the two most powerful words. I think Brene Brown also reiterates that. Those words, "me too," because just like that, no longer alone. And it's crazy how quick we are to judge, right? And how many people just hide behind that proverbial mask.
Well, exactly. And even with that guy, like, I don't remember a lot of the details of his story. The part I do remember is he wasn't from here, from North Battleford. He lived, I think he had said, a couple hours away. And, this was something he did once a year, where he'd come down to North Battleford because he couldn't go to the hospital where he was living because he knew people that worked there. And so he'd come to North Battleford and stay on the mental health ward. And like I said, I think he did it about once a year. And the only person that knew where he was at that point in time, like, was his boss. So if anybody had to get a hold of him for any sort of emergency or anything, they'd have to call his boss, and his boss would get in touch with them. He'd go back to work, and, pretty much everyone else just thinking he went on a fishing trip or whatever. Like, so yeah, so even, the mask is always there, even when you are getting help sometimes.
Yeah, it saddens me that he had to leave his own community or go somewhere where he wouldn't potentially be recognized just so that he could get the help that he needed. And that obviously speaks to the stigma that still exists. But do you feel as though we're moving the right way when it comes to men and mental health and just being a little more transparent and open?
I feel there's still a lot of work to do, but I also believe that we've come a tremendous way to where things were even 10 years ago. I'm definitely seeing more men open up. More people in general opening up. I'm seeing them get more support from people in their lives. And to me, that's always a good thing.
Well, and speaking of support, let's get back to Landsberg for a second, because at what point did he understand what his response did for you?
So it was about maybe two or 3 years later. Again, TV. I was watching it, and a commercial had come on for Bell Let's Talk Day. I believe it was 2012. And that was the first year that Michael was labeled as like an ambassador for Bell Let's Talk. And so he's in this commercial. And I remembered that I had never messaged him. After that day, we talked back and forth. We had never messaged each other since. I still give him grief about not checking up on me, but yeah, I saw that commercial. I wondered, well, if I still had his email in my computer, and I sent him off one saying, you probably won't remember me, but this is all that's happened, and this is where I really was that day. This is what my plan was that day. And you talking to me, you planting that seed of getting help, that's a reason why I'm still here, which was at that time about 3 years later.
Wow. And I read an interesting article through TSN recently by Landsberg, and it talked about how important it was for him, how meaningful it was for him to know that he had an impact on another human being. And then there was actually an event that took place in Saskatoon, and I believe it was hosted by Babcock, right?
Yeah, it was. And I love this story because Michael hates it. But it was the Neural Health Project, I think was the name of the organization that put it on or something. And it was a massive fundraiser that really isn't for peasants like me. This was $1,000 a plate fundraising dinner. There were going to be people there from the sports world, the entertainment world, everything. And the doctor that put it on with Mike Babcock called me, and she had said that there was a couple that donated 2 tickets, and they wanted them to go to 2 people that would really appreciate being there. And so we got the invite. And at this point in time, I'd never met Michael. So this was going to be the first time we ever met. Like I said, this was a fancy thing. I mean, $1,000 a plate. People there were in suits that are probably worth more than what I make in a year. And the invitation we got said Prairie Chic. And again, I urge people, Google Prairie Chic and see what the definition is, because that's what I did. And I showed up to this thing. I mean, Pam had gotten a new dress. We were dating at that time. She looked absolutely stunning. I showed up in a white golf shirt that I think I bought that day, and my camouflage cargo shorts. And I nailed it. I pulled it off.
Yeah, I think you purchased that at Walmart the day of, yes? A Walmart special, perhaps?
Day of. The shorts I had previously. They were just my special shorts.
Yeah, for special occasions.
Exactly. Just the fancy ones.
Well, and I know that Michael talks about this. He talks about the first time that you two met, and you embraced in a hug, and it was very meaningful for him. What was it like for you to meet the person who, in a roundabout way, was able to help you fight through the darkest day you've ever had?
It was pretty emotional, actually, because when I looked at him, like, I remember when me and Pam were walking up to I believe it was at TCU Place in Saskatoon, and we were across the street and we saw him go in. And that, I mean, to me, like, you know, while everyone there is looking at him and thinking, okay, cool, this Michael Landsberg, you know, and for me, it was just some guy who decided to reach back and save my life. And that's, I mean, that's what that hug was for. And that whole night was just an unbelievable night. And I just know, like, Michael was doing his thing on stage, and me and Pam are sitting at the table, and he's telling the story, and then he introduces me, and I stand up and I sit right back down. And the first person to stand up and start a standing ovation, to me, of all people, I'm getting a standing ovation, and there's like Mike Babcock started it. And there's a guy who just signed, at that time, he had just signed his contract with the Leafs for $56 million. And this guy's clapping for me. Like, I walked around the room that night and these people knew who I was. And that just humbled me. It shocked me. But I mean, it was a night of celebrating.
That must have been quite an incredible experience, Tyson. And I'm curious, why, in your opinion, did so many people resonate with your story? Why did they one by one stand up to recognize and validate you?
Because I'm not well known. You know, like, I look at myself through all this with speaking about mental health and stuff. I look at myself as your average guy, you know, and I've always said it's so important when anybody shares their story, you know, when a celebrity does it, or a pro athlete or whatever. And that's, you know, that's super important. But, you know, it's also important for the guys like me to do it, because that's, you know, I represent your next door neighbor, you know, your coworker, you know, your best friend or close friend. You know, I'm just the guy you see on the street. And I think more people, more average people, I guess, I think they relate to that. You know, it's hard to relate to somebody who's, you know, like I said, a celebrity and stuff like that. Like, you can relate to what they're sharing about, but in terms of just actual life experience and stuff, I think us regular folk have a bit of an edge.
Well, I think, Tyson, you also represent hope. You represent hope for better days. And I think you also really remind people not only of the importance to reach out for help, but to remember the impact that we can have on people, even through an email. That is how it all started. The fact that Landsberg took the time to send you an email, that did not take a lot of time. And
No.
It was that single event that was the catalyst to change your entire life.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I mean, I can't say it any better than you just did. You know, it's looking back now, and it was just, you know, one simple action that somebody took the time to do. And it, you know, it didn't take him much effort, I'm sure. And, you know, the outcome is definitely pretty awesome.
And then 2 years later, it was you who sent an invite to Landsberg.
I did. I had asked Pam to marry me. She, for still reasons I don't quite know, said yes. Because I can be extremely annoying sometimes.
Were you wearing the cargo shorts when you proposed?
I don't believe I was.
I thought those were for special occasions.
I might start saying I was, though, because that makes for a kick-ass story. But yeah, we were planning the wedding, and I said to her one night, I said, you know what? Let's send him an invite. I'm going to see if he'll be my best man. And he took me up on it, and he showed up. It was, I mean, he showed up probably 5 minutes before we had to walk down the aisle and stuff. But yeah, it was an awesome experience having him there for sure.
Well, it's not like your wedding was in Saskatoon either. I mean, Landsberg had to catch a plane to Saskatoon, then to PA, get into a car and drive north of PA. Yes?
Yeah, we got married near Spruce at the Spruce Home Hall, which is I think about 30 miles straight north of PA. So yeah, he actually he flew to Saskatoon, rented a car, and used GPS to somehow find his way through rural Saskatchewan. And so the fact he made it there on time just is a testament to his character.
There's a beautiful moment in your story where you talk about standing there at the front, Landsberg's beside you, you're looking around, surrounded by the people that love you, care about you and Pam, and you think, how did I get here? How did you get there, Tyson? What was your answer to that?
I reached out at my darkest time when I truly felt like the only person in the world going through what I was going through. And yeah, I reached out, even though it was to this person I'd never met before, never spoken to before. And the relief I got, like I said earlier, the relief I got from that kept me going.
Pictures are powerful. There are beautiful pictures that I've seen of you and Pam. I think that was when I was in your home in North Battleford, the first time that I actually met you in person when we were interviewing for the book.
Oh, right.
And the picture just blew me away because, I mean, there's all of these moments, this linear progression of things that happened because you reached out, because you talked. And there's an incredible picture of you, Tyson, with your daughter. I think that one's actually Abby. And I mean, Abby's 6 now, right? You have 3 beautiful daughters. The fact that 2 of them would not be here had you not reached out is it's mind-blowing. It's emotional. It's inspirational. It's everything.
It hits me for sure every time I realize that. You know, I was actually looking at a picture the other day because we've added to that picture. We have my oldest daughter, Kira, who's 17. She would have been 6 way back at that time. But Abby, and in May, we invited Cameron into the home. And I've always said how I spent most of my life being rejected by women, and now I'm surrounded by them. And it's just been an awesome ride. And yeah, it hits a guy pretty hard when you look at a picture like that and you think, like, you know, yeah, sure, Pam would have, you know, had she never met me, she would have met someone, got married, and probably had kids. But they wouldn't be Abby and Cameron. Like, Abby and Cameron would not be here had I not reached out 10, you know, almost 11 years ago.
Pretty remarkable. You mentioned Kira being 17. And I'm curious, at what point, because I meet with a lot of parents who aren't sure when to have some of those tough conversations around suicide with their kids. Like, was there a specific day where you realized, I think she just needs to hear it from me?
I don't remember the specific the time it was. I think I'd done a video interview with Michael for Off the Record. I don't know, a few years after our initial talk anyway. And he had done a couple articles as well. So I knew they were going to be posted onto social media and shared and whatnot. So it was, in and around that time when I discussed things with her. And I think we're pretty open about a lot of stuff now. I mean, she's 17, so there's still that typical teenager part of it, but at the same time, when she's dealing with issues that she's going through and stuff, she knows what I've been through. So, I'd like to think that creates an openness with us.
I think that's one of the things that I've always loved about you, your vulnerability, and the fact that you continuously share your story just gives other people permission to do the same. And one of the things that you say often is, it's what you have, it's not who you are, because there's a lot of men who continuously struggle with identity, with getting a label, a diagnosis, and they wear it as though that's who they are. But you phrase it perfectly. No, that's not who you are.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm Tyson. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I'm a friend, and that's who I am. I just happen to have this illness. So, I mean, I don't know how else to say it other than that. It's like, like I said in the book, depression is what I have. It's not who I am.
Yeah. And if people want to reach out or get a little bit more information about Tyson Williams, what would the best way to go about that be?
Oh, I mean, you can look me up on Twitter. I'm on there. I'm also on Facebook. I'm not sure what my Twitter handle is off the top of my head, but I'm sure you'll find it. Also the book. I mean, my God, people go get the book. Yeah. And just,
yeah, the book that Tyson's alluding to is the Mental Health, It's Time to Talk. And that was a beautiful project because so many of the men, yourself included, when I first reached out to you, Tyson, there was no hesitancy. It was simply, let's do this. Let's get my story out there. Put my face by my story. And again, that's what I love. You're done with the hiding. You're incredibly transparent. Your 3 daughters picked one hell of a great father. Pam picked a great husband. And I really thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And with the book, I mean, and I've heard you say it before, when with everybody who's a part of that book, when you ask them, there was just no hesitation with anybody. And I think that speaks volumes for everyone else who's in that book and shared their story. And it's powerful, and it's something that's just so needed. And what I tell people in regards to the book is, you might read one story and not get a whole lot from it, but guaranteed somebody's story in that book is going to impact whoever's reading it. And yeah, it was great to be a part of. It was an honor, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tyson. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for taking the time to tune in. Be well. Take good care.